No. So why are we here? We're going to talk about effective influencing. So what is influencing? Well, influencing is the ability to bring others to your own way of thinking without force or coercion. It's not manipulation. I might have lost you, haven't I, really? So what's wrong with that statement? What's wrong with everything I've just done?
No impact.
No impact. Why not?
Wasn't very engaging.
Wasn't very engaging. Oh dear. What was missing? Passion? Body. I got a body. What more language do you want? So, projection, tone of voice, enthusiasm, confidence. Hey, hang on a minute. This, just hold on. So let's encapsulate all that in terms of congruence. What I was saying was probably pretty good. Well, I thought so. I wrote it. But how I was saying it, how I was delivering it, body language, tone of voice, engagement, absolutely kills it dead. So that's the first thing about influencing an impact is congruence. If you've got a message that you want to actually deliver to somebody, then make sure that you're actually delivering it with congruence. So you're engaging the body, you're engaging the tone of voice, and you're engaging the audience at that point. Because I think some down here said about engagement. If you don't engage the people that you're trying to influence, then you won't get your point across. Now, with anything like this, which is what people tend to call soft skills, which actually I call the harder skills, because it's quite difficult sometimes to actually do some of this stuff. A lot of people, when it comes to influencing, look at it and think, oh, I don't know, it's not for me. But we can all learn about influencing. We can all learn about being congruent. We can all learn about delivering a message. There are some natural influencers. And if you look in your business and you go back tomorrow, it is Friday tomorrow, isn't it? I'm not getting you working Saturday, am I? No, that's all right then. But you go back to your business tomorrow, have a look. Who are the people who can really effectively influence people? Watch the behaviours. Listen to how they speak. Listen to how they deliver the message and how flexible they are when they're actually talking to other people. And if you feel brave enough, you might want to influence them by asking them to be your mentor. If not, just carry on watching the behaviours. But make sure they know, otherwise they'll just think you're stalking them. So one of the key things in this that I want to mention is influence is not about manipulation. Influence is about getting your point across and making it in such a way that you make an effective argument for whatever it is that you want to get through to that person or that group of people. Okay? Within that, you'll start to develop confidence. I didn't get this confident. It just happened. Okay, don't stare at me. Confidence comes from actually achievement and actually doing things on a regular basis. So don't be afraid of actually trying out the influence. Do it. See what it feels like. Have a go. Because if you don't, you'll never do it. So, point number 2. Go out there and do some of it. See what happens. Try it, obviously, with nothing too important to start with, but have a go. Who are you dealing with? Now, this is a really important factor, because if you don't actually know who you're dealing with at the start of this, then you're going to have a problem. Because I could come and try and influence you today, couldn't I? I could tell you, just get on with it. It's Thursday, get on with it, want it on my desk Monday morning, okay, right. Or I could come to you and say, how's the work going? Do you think you'd be able to do that? You know, I know it's the weekend. But so there's all sorts of different ways of getting things done and influencing people. Now, if I look at this, it's typical consultancy type quadrant map, this. It comes out at most things. This relates to a company called Tracom. It's social styles. What it tries to do is identify people into 4 boxes. We don't all sit in 4 boxes. You know, we don't all sit in this box or sit in this box. What we do have is preferences. If we can identify the preferences that other people have to how they want to be dealt with and how they react to certain things, then what we get is the opportunity to flex our style in order to influence them. So just let's take an example. If we look at this axis here, it talks about control and emotion. So up here, people will be a bit more controlling in this half of the model. In this side, this quad part, they tend to be a bit more emotional, emote a bit more. They might cry, but possibly not. Across this side, we start talking about tell. This is what I did, sorry about that. But it's the telling. This is what I want done, this is how I want it doing. This side is more about asking. Now, when you get up here, in this quadrant, the analytical style, that's the person who might be a bit slower paced. They want all the information. They might want to do a lot of spreadsheets. And they sit in their office and they close the door for a week, and then there's sort of white smoke that they've got the answer. These people, the expressive styles, just want to get it done. You know, it's going to be great. I'm not expressive at all. Just want to get it done. It's going to be fantastic. There's a silver ball over here, or there's another one over here, and there's one over there. Which one do I choose? I'll take this one because it's a gold one. Now, if you go into an analytical person as an expressive person and try and influence that analytical person to do what you want them to do or to come round to your opinion, what do you think is going to happen if you bounce in like Tigger and go, hey, I've got a great idea. Can you tell me, can you do it? Will you do it? And can you make a decision now? What do you think is going to happen? This is not a rhetorical question. Meltdown for the analytical. So what you'll have is you'll have somebody who doesn't feel comfortable with that type of influence. So as an expressive style, you may need to take a step back, look at the person who's the analytical and say, right, okay, how do I deal with that? So you need to be able to flex your style to deal with different people in the organisation. That might not feel comfortable. But if you can do it, it's really valuable. I put a proviso around all of this because this is about flexibility of you and identification of them, effectively. The proviso is that what you continue to want to be is authentic. If you're not authentically you, then you'll come across as false. And immediately people start thinking, not quite sure about him or not quite sure about her. So having the ability to flex your style but retain your credibility and your authenticity is really important. Okay, everybody with me so far? Yes, Patrick is what you're looking for. Yes, marvellous. Well, at least there was no no's, that's good. And it's the same at this side, the driving style, the driver who might just turn around and say, this is what I want, this is how I want it, and this is what needs doing. The amiable style, maybe a bit more people-orientated, team-orientated. How's this going to affect my people? So if you come with a bright idea and 25 of his team or her team is going to disappear, that's going to be a real problem for that amiable type of person. So you need to know that and you need to understand that. And then you need to understand how you actually influence that person on that basis. So as we go through the next 30 minutes or so, we'll address some of these and hopefully you'll go away with a few nuggets that you can say, I can take that away and do something with it. Okay, in the paperwork that was left either on your chair or underneath your chair, you should have something that says personal brand. Yeah, got it? Has everybody got one? If you haven't got one, if you stick your hand up, Jeanette and Heidi will give you another copy. We've talked about, and very quickly we've talked about, other people and what they're like. What we're going to try and do now is establish not necessarily what you like, but some of what your core values are, who you really are, what makes you. So what I'd like to do is take a couple of minutes, or less if I decide, and circle 5 of those words that actually describe you at your best. So circle the 5 attributes that describe you at your best. So taking those 5 that you've circled, tick 3 of the circled items that are absolutely you. They're what are really your core. So tick 3 that you've circled. Now this is a very rough and ready method of finding out what some of your core values are and what it is that the behaviours that you actually have. Okay? What I'd now like to do is exactly the same exercise, but just look at 3 items that you look down that list and think, actually, I'd like to develop those 3 items, and underline those 3 items. Just underline the 3 items that you look at and think, I really would like to actually do that differently and develop myself better in those areas. And just while you're doing that, because I've just been walking around the room and noticed that active listening has been taking place, because I did say underline them and people are now drawing square boxes round them. I'm saying nothing. It's not important, but it is about listening as well. Okay, everybody got those? So what you've now got is the 3 things that you know that you're good at, that are your core. And you've got 3 things that you may be able to develop further in order to increase and make your flexibility better. So as you develop those other 3 items, you then start to have 6 items in your toolbox that makes you more flexible. The key with that is you still retain your authenticity, because the items that you've underlined are the items that you want to develop. They're not the items I've come to you and said, you've got to develop those. They're not the items that your boss has come to you and said, you need to develop those. They're the items that you've chosen. So when you go back into your workplace tomorrow, you can start and think about that. You can look at the person that you're going to observe in terms of who has really good influencing abilities. You can look at yours and you can start to use those 6 elements. So when you're actually influencing people, you're bringing those to bear. So we've talked about awareness of others, and we've talked about self-awareness. If you think again about that 4-quadrant model, and you think about your self-awareness, where your preference might be. Think about your preference where you might sit in that 4-quadrant model, and also think about your personal branding, and then think about that when you're influencing your next person. Because this is not about the what in terms of all the technical information that you carry and the technical arguments that you bring to bear. This is about the who, the where, the when, and more importantly, the how. How do you influence that person? So it is key about flexing your style and retaining your authenticity. Everybody happy? Closed leading question. Always works. So these are some of the behaviours that we may actually want to show and be when we're influencing. We've already talked about congruence. Congruence is something that we've talked about in terms of the language, the words that we're using, the body language, the tone of voice. They're all critical. So congruence we've mentioned. What about rapport building? What is rapport building?
Building a connection with the other person.
Building a connection with the other person. How do you build a connection with another person? Sorry? Common areas of interest, yes. Asking questions, getting to know them, yeah. Humour, yeah. I like that. What about this side of the room? Communication skills, questioning, listening, a lot of things that we've got up here create good communication skills. What rapport building isn't is when you walk into the room and you're sat together and you go, did you see the cricket last night? Did you watch the fishing final? Because that's the thing. It's nothing to say that you can't do that, but rapport is not about the first two minutes of a meeting. It's about constant relationship building and knowing where you're standing. So it is that key thing about building the relationship. And some of that might be about finding out about that person. Not necessarily about a personal issue, not about have you got 5 kids and 3 dogs. It might be about how's the business going? I noticed last month that your particular division of the business increased their sales by 5%. That's fantastic. How did you do that? Because that person then is thinking, they're interested in my business, my bit of the business. Therefore, they're interested in me. So when you get into this piece here around common ground, which I think somebody up there mentioned, it's also about empathy. Blimey, to increase your sales 5%, that must have been quite a lot of hard work. How did you do that? Empathising, putting yourself in someone else's shoes in order to find out more about them and more about their business. Anybody know what the difference between empathy and sympathy is? Empathy, go on.
Empathy is when you haven't experienced that situation yourself, but you try and understand it and put yourself in the shoes. Sympathy is when you can sympathise because you've lived that experience yourself.
Exactly. So did everybody hear that? I'll say that again. So empathy is about you haven't experienced that particular, you haven't had that experience, but you acknowledge it and you recognise it. Sympathy is you've had that experience and you can sympathise with it and say it's really tough and it's hard and it's difficult and I really am connected to you at that point. So empathy is about standing in somebody's shoes. Sympathy is about somebody walking off in those shoes. So empathy is not about knowing what the experience is, but recognising that that experience might have been tough or hard work, or actually that experience might have been really exciting and fantastic, and celebrate it with them. So building that empathy, building that rapport, building that relationship will help. And the other one in there is active listening. And I mentioned listening earlier about the underlining and the boxes. There are 3 levels of listening. I'm not going to go into the others, but let's stick with 3. First level is listening for your opportunity to say something. So, right, okay, he said all that. And actually, what I did last week on holiday was this. So there's listening to get your opportunity to say something. The second level is the level that a lot of us do, which is, yeah, right, okay. I must remember to get my mother's birthday card next week. Yeah, okay, So we're feeling that we might be listening. We're trying to make the other person feel that we're listening. But in actual fact, we've got something else in our minds. Anybody done the shopping list while I've been talking? In the heads? Nobody's admitting to it? That's good. Active listening is that moment when you start to ask questions or you summarise. What I've just heard is that your business, actually, this proposal that I've got, would struggle with that because we're going to reduce the number of people by that. So I'm hearing that. I now need to know more about that. So tell me some more about it. So you're actually consciously listening. You're also listening with your eyes. I know that's a strange thing to say, but we come back to congruence. Yeah, I'm really bought into that idea. I think it's great. Is he? Not quite sure. So being able to recognise those body language signs and that tone of voice, which adds congruence to the message. If you're getting answers back or you're having a conversation and you're hearing by seeing and recognising something's not quite right, then call it out. Hang on a minute. I know you're saying that, but I'm getting the feeling that's not quite how you feel. What's the problem with that? That's really active listening. And what you're doing then is you're still building a relationship with that person because you're actually delving into things that they're concerned about as well. So active listening and questioning are two real key areas of any type of influencing, along with that congruence and being able to track it. All the others are really important as well, but those three are really key, in my view. And certainly when I've been influencing at different levels on the board or with senior managers or at lower or higher levels in the organisation, finding those things and being able to read the signs are really critical. And you can recognise, you start to recognise it. So again, practice it. When you're looking at a conversation going on, if there's somebody having a conversation over there, try and read what's happening. You don't need to hear the words. Try and read what's happening. All that sort of stuff. Might not be quite as dramatic as that. So I just want to bring some theory into this as well. Robert Cialdini writes a lot on influencing and communication, and this is out of his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Now, it talks about four key areas, really. One is reciprocation. If I give you something, you might give me something back. Anybody walk down the street and you've had Hare Krishna people give you a flower, and then they sort of rattle a box under your nose, and you put 10 pence in, and you then scurry away and put the flower in the waste paper bin, and then 2 minutes later they come back, retrieve it from the waste paper, and do the same again to somebody else. Reciprocation. I've received something from them, so maybe I should give something back. And often the reciprocation can be bigger than what they gave to you. And I have a friend who works for Unipart, and they have a massive Unipart university. And they spend a lot of money developing their people in all sorts of different ways, and giving to their people lots of time, lots of money, lots of time. But when it comes to a problem, and somebody says, one of the managers says, we've got a problem on this particular line, or we've got a problem with this product, the guys on the shop floor will say, it's all right, you leave it with us, we'll sort it out. And they'll shift heaven and earth to do that. And so the reciprocation comes back again, because that saving in that piece, whatever it is far greater than what they're actually putting into the university, albeit they're still putting a lot of money into that. So reciprocation, very important. Commitment and consistency. Commitment, absolutely. If you're going to stand there and be committed to what you're saying, you have got to be committed and understand that you're committed. And those people you're influencing need to know you're committed to it as well. It's not committed to the point of going over the cliff edge, because the same way that you're trying to put arguments and influence people to your way of thinking, they may also be trying to influence you. And they may have some good points. They may have some good arguments. So you may actually turn around and say, well, hang on a minute, I need to be flexible here, and I identify what's happening. So you might need to have a bit of give and take in there. But being consistent and authentic is key. If you're not consistent, and I know I've talked about flexing your style, but I come back then again to this core that we talked about in terms of your personal brand. If you're working to your personal brand and your true beliefs, and you're consistently doing that, then you're being consistent. It's not about necessarily having a consistent argument, although that always helps. Social proof is a wonderful thing. The Cabinet Office, a few years ago, set up a thing called the Nudge Unit. And a friend of mine was one of the psychologists in there. What they did was they looked at writing different types of letters to different people to ask them to do different things. So one of the things they did, and this is public knowledge, so it's not confidential, they wrote to hairdressers in Northampton and said 80% of all hairdressers in Northampton pay their tax bill within 60 days of receipt of the tax bill. Now, whether that's true, false, or indifferent doesn't matter because it was an experiment. What happened was the hairdressers in Northampton paid quicker. So they got 30%, the Treasury got 30% more money in faster. So they looked at that and said, well, if they're doing it, then maybe we should be doing it. So social proof is a really interesting thing from a psychological point of view. You can probably only use it once or twice in the same letter, I would suggest, because people will get a bit canny with that. But there are other ways of doing it. Liking is another one. If I don't like you, I'm unlikely to want to be influenced by you. So I'm not very keen on you. I like her. Well, you can influence me. Yeah, not you. Sorry. I'll buy you coffee later. But it is about liking. So we've talked about rapport building. We've talked about building relationship. If people like you and actually understand you, they're more likely to want to be influenced by you. So you're already starting at a good point in that respect. And the next one I want to talk about, again, this is coming from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Worth a read. Some good stuff in there, and you just pick and choose what you want, but there is some good stuff in there. Stephen Covey, Circle of Influence. You will have certain things that are under your control, and you'll be proactive about that. So there'll be things like in your team, at work, socially, family. So there'll be things in your control that you can say, I can influence those. Now, if you influence those effectively, then you are creating a reputation. You're creating something about you that says, actually, they do really well in there because they influence this particular part of the business. If you get into the circle of concern, that's the bit where you're going, oh, terrorism's terrible in the world. We've got this war in Afghanistan. We've got another one impending here. The government's not doing the right job. I could do a better job on the England football team. You spend so much time in the circle of concern, which is very reactive, that the real piece where you can influence, you're not spending enough time in. So what I would say to you today is go back to your workplace, look at that and say, what are the things that I can effectively influence? Because if you make a change to how you influence something, then the organisation changes as well. Because organisations are only the sum of the people within it. So small changes that you make are the things that make big changes in organisations. But your circle of influence, if you can have that and start to expand it, you can start to expand it into the circle of concern. Everybody get that?
Yes, Patrick.
Marvellous. It's coffee for you as well. So, The circle of influence, I really think that's a good one to have a read of as well, because it's very interesting and very pertinent to what you do in terms of how you influence people and where you influence them. Where do we influence? Now this side here, on the open side, we probably know a lot of that. And a lot of what we do is open influencing. So we might have an idea, we might be in a meeting, we might want to actually bring forward the idea. So we try and influence people in these open forums, whether it be about talking to them, whether it be about writing to them, telephoning them, whatever else it happens to be. And what I've been talking about up to yet is all around those open areas, when you actually go and are actually having that interaction person to person. This area, the hidden area, is also very interesting, because that's what influences people as well. So say you turn up every day in jeans and t-shirt to work, and this one particular day you turn up in suit and tie. And ladies, whatever that works out for you. Now somebody may actually think, he's changed a behaviour, or she's changed a behaviour. So that's interesting. I wonder why. So they might just keep an eye out for what's happening. Because if they see that a behaviour has changed or an image has changed, then maybe there's going to be an attitude change as well. Maybe they're going to do something slightly different. Maybe they're going to work in a different way. So they start to look for those changes. And it might be that you've decided to mentor somebody who's just come into the organisation. So you mentor that person and they're getting on a lot better because of your influence, because of how you're dealing with them. So what happens is somebody taps you on the shoulder one day and says, I've got a project that I'd like you to be involved in, because what I've seen is a change in your attitude and behaviour, which has meant that I can recognise you'd be good in my project. And you've done some really good work with the person that you're mentoring. So that's great. What you've done in your circle of influence, you expanded your circle of influence. So this is a really good way in terms of nurturing relationships, volunteering, mentoring, doing something for someone else, that actually means that you start to push the edges of your circle of influence, and people recognise that. And it isn't a case of standing in front of the boss and saying, got a new suit on? That's not going to work, because you're just going to look and say, well, get a better one. So it's subtle, but it's very important and very useful to do. Stakeholder rapport. When I wrote that slide, I thought, stakeholder rapport sounds like a ready meal. What it is about people who are in your business that aren't necessarily your boss, they aren't necessarily the people that work for you, they're not necessarily peers, but they can be people outside of your business as well. So they might be, if you're it might be a supplier, it may be a customer, it could be a whole raft of things, but they may be outside of your business itself. So building some of those stakeholder relationships and stakeholder rapport, again, increases your circle of influence. And I'm not saying that you've got an opportunity to do all of this all at once, because I think that goes back to what Jennifer was saying. If you try and do too much too quickly, you can often put yourself under a lot of pressure and create stress. So pick some of these things out and look and think, I can do something with that. Just one or two things that means that you help your influencing as you go along. And we come to the end now. No cheering. And I've got a template for you. which I think is interesting to take back. Called prove. So the first element of this is about what your position or proposal is. So what is the proposal that you're giving me? Make it concise. Make it accurate. Make it precise. Something that's snappy. The R piece, the 3 reasons, I've put 3 reasons in there. You can have more than 3 reasons. What tends to happen if you go over 3 reasons when you're having a conversation is people switch off. They start to switch off because the three key, and I say key reasons, are the ones that are probably going to sell it. The other 10 that you've got are going to be, it's a bit like the 80-20 rule. 80% is going to be in that 3, 20% is going to be in the other 23. So concentrate on the key ones. And the reasons that support your proposals are about benefits, not features. For example, we're going to buy a new IT system from Sweden. Full stop. That's not a reason, that's a feature. We are going to buy a new IT system from Sweden because what that means is we save £100,000 on the capital cost, and because of the functionality of this machine, it means that we can increase our profitability by X pounds. Now that's a benefit. You've still got the feature, but you've got the benefit. And if you've got 3 of those, people might want to tear holes in your analytical pieces of information that you've got, but I'll leave that up to you, because then you've got to argue your case on that. So having some three good reasons that are benefits. Then think about the other view. And we come back to empathy and knowing the person who's stood in front of you or sat in front of you. What are they thinking? When I come to them this week and go, I want to buy this computer from Sweden because of, take a step into their shoes and think, what are they going to say to that? What are their counter-arguments going to be? Because if you then establish what their counter-arguments are, in your presentation, in your conversation, you can actually say, I thought there might be an issue around, so I have thought about that, and the solution to it is X, Y, and Z. Or, I have no solution at the moment, but I'd like to discuss that with you further. So don't say you can do it when you can't, but at least actually identify that you know that there are other arguments. And if you've got 3 other arguments and you've established that you can knock 2 on the head and you've only got 1 to have a discussion with, then you're a long way down the route of getting to a yes. The more yeses you can get in this influencing conversation is great. The more people say yes to you, the less likely they are to say no. If you've got 10 yeses in a conversation and at the end of it they say, no, I don't want to do it, then you can go back to, but you said yes to this, yes to this, yes to that. So what's the real reason why you're saying no? So there's something fundamental then that they're saying no to. So really understanding the other person's arguments. Then verification and evidence. In other organisations, when they bought this particular piece of kit, what has happened is this. And here's the telephone number of the finance director to ring to verify that piece of information I've given to you. Now, that may or may not be a thing that you can do because there might be competitor issues around that and a whole raft of things. But if you can pick up verification and evidence that verify and evidence your particular points, you've gone a long way to actually influencing these people. And then the end is a summary. These are the summary of the reasons. This is what you've said yes to. And we've also talked about some of the arguments, one of which we know we have still got to do some work on. However, what I'd like to do next is set up a meeting with your deputy or whatever else it happens to be so that we can progress this proposition. Now, if you've got lots of yeses, it's difficult then for people to say no, depending on the type of person they are and what level they are. I'm going to be around for the rest of the day. I'm going to have a drink at the networking. If there's anything that comes to you during the course of the rest of the day, do please get hold of me and we can have a conversation. Thank you very much indeed. You've been a wonderful audience.